It is 9:47 p.m. Eastern. We are now 2 hours and 33 minutes into this broadcast. I want to give a comprehensive casualty update. These figures are estimates drawn from emergency management feeds, wire reports, and regional news networks. They are not precise, and they are certainly undercounts because large portions of the affected areas have gone dark. Portland metro area, estimated dead between 3,000 and 4,000. Vancouver, approximately 1,800. Seattle. Figures are unclear, but trending toward 2,500. Hamburg. German authorities have stopped providing death counts and are now only reporting mass casualty status. The last official figure was 6,200 dead. Gdansk, approximately 2,000. Osaka, no confirmed figures. The city is dark. Antwerp, Marseille, Riga, Busan, too early for reliable data. We are looking at a global event that, within its first 3 hours of public awareness, has already killed somewhere between 15,000 and 25,000 people. Likely more.
I've been handed a piece of information that I want to share carefully because I think the way it's framed matters. A listener who identifies themselves as an active duty military physician, they will not give their name or branch, has sent us a detailed message describing what medical personnel are observing in the infected. They describe a pathogen that appears to attack the prefrontal cortex with extraordinary speed, eliminating higher cognitive function within what seems to be 15 to 30 minutes of initial exposure. The infected retain motor function, respiratory function, and a drive state. They characterize it as purely instinctual aggression. They note the infected do not stop moving due to pain. They note infection appears to be transmitted through fluid contact. And then they write something that I will read exactly as they wrote it. Tell people to not hesitate. The person in front of them is not the person they knew. The compassion that makes us human is, tonight, the thing most likely to get us killed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it.
The implications of that transmission pattern, fluid contact, rapid neurological degradation, explain a great deal about why ports are the epicenters. Shipping crews, dock workers, customs officials, people in close physical proximity to those who first carried whatever this is. The World Health Organization has convened its emergency committee under international health regulations. They have not yet declared a public health emergency of international concern, which sounds bureaucratically absurd given what we're describing. But that process requires member state reporting and verification steps that take time the world does not currently have. We've been told informally that the PHEIC declaration is likely within the next 2 hours. Not that the label changes what's happening, but it activates international legal frameworks for resource sharing, border coordination, and military medical cooperation.
It is now 10:31 p.m. Eastern, 3 hours and 17 minutes into our broadcast. And I want to pause on something human for a moment because the numbers are becoming so large that they risk losing all meaning. Somewhere in Portland tonight, there is a school that stayed open late for a parent-teacher event, and some of those parents and teachers are not coming home. Somewhere in Hamburg, a restaurant was full of people celebrating a birthday at midnight local time. And those people faced something unimaginable. Somewhere in Osaka, a city I visited once, a city of extraordinary beauty and hospitality, people are in the dark right now and we cannot hear them, and that silence is its own kind of grief. I don't say this to make you despair. I say it because the moment we stop feeling the individual weight of this, we have lost something essential about what we're fighting for.
The United States military situation is deteriorating in ways that require direct reporting. Joint Base Lewis McChord has confirmed that 2 of its forward units dispatched into southern Seattle at approximately 9 p.m. have gone silent. Their last radio contact described situations where the distinction between civilian and infected civilian had become impossible to manage. The units were attempting to establish a perimeter around the Rainier Valley neighborhood and the communication simply stopped. Fort Lewis Command has not confirmed the status of those soldiers. Additionally, and this is significant, there are reports, unverified but coming from multiple independent sources, of infected individuals within military installations themselves. If that is accurate, if the infection has breached the controlled environments of military bases, the entire operational response structure is compromised. This is the scenario that turns a containment operation into something else entirely.
We have a message from someone identifying themselves as a National Guard sergeant currently sheltering in a community center in Portland's Selwood neighborhood. They write, "I have 42 civilians with me, mostly elderly, a few children. We have food for maybe 2 days. We are holding. I need someone to know we are here and we are holding. Sergeant, we hear you. We are broadcasting your location in general terms, Selwood Community Center, Portland, to every emergency coordination line we have access to. To the 42 people in that room, you are not forgotten. You are not invisible. Someone is going to come. Please hold on." To every listener who has the capability to reach emergency coordinators, Selwood, Portland, 42 people. Hold that in your mind.
It is 11:58 p.m. Eastern. We are now 4 hours and 44 minutes into this broadcast, and the situation has evolved dramatically in the last 90 minutes. I want to provide a geographic update. The following cities are now reporting confirmed outbreak activity. On the North American continent, Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, San Francisco's Mission District, and the Port of Oakland. And we have preliminary but credible reports from the Port of New Orleans and the waterfront areas of Baltimore. In Europe, Hamburg, Gdansk, Antwerp, Marseille, Riga, and now Athens, Greece, where the port of Piraeus appears to be the origin point. In Asia, Osaka, Busan, and now multiple districts of Shanghai, China, where the Chinese government has imposed a complete information blackout. We know something is happening in Shanghai because maritime traffic tracking satellites show every vessel in the port of Shanghai has gone stationary. Every single one.
China's information blackout is something I want to address directly because it affects every person listening. Shanghai is one of the most densely populated cities on Earth, Faikai, over 24 million people in its greater metropolitan area. If the outbreak has reached Shanghai and the Chinese government is controlling the information flow, we may never know the true scope of what's happening there until it's too late for the rest of the world to respond appropriately. International journalists are reporting that their local contacts in Shanghai have gone silent in the last hour. That silence has a different quality from a communication blackout caused by infrastructure failure. When people stop talking because they can't, the silence has gaps, interruptions, partial signals. When people stop talking because someone told them to, the silence is complete. Tonight's silence from Shanghai is the second kind.
The NATO emergency session has concluded, and a readout has been issued. I'll summarize the key points. NATO member states have agreed to immediately share all military medical intelligence on the pathogen. Article 4 consultations are underway, meaning member states have invoked the clause that allows collective discussion of threats to security. Article 5, collective defense, has not been invoked because this is not a state-on-state military threat in the traditional sense. NATO has authorized allied military forces to cross borders for humanitarian and defensive purposes without the standard protocols. And critically, the communiqué includes language I've never seen in a NATO document before. Member states are authorized to make independent decisions regarding the use of lethal force in defense of critical infrastructure and population centers. That language means something. That language means the rules have changed.
It is 1:47 a.m. Eastern. We are now 6.5 hours into this, and I need to acknowledge something that has changed in the texture of what we're reporting. In the early hours, we were describing outbreaks, we were describing overwhelmed hospitals, we were describing panicked evacuations. Now we are describing the beginning of something different. Governments are not speaking the language of containment anymore. They are speaking the language of preservation. There is a difference. Containment means you believe you can stop it. Preservation means you are deciding what to save. That shift, that linguistic shift in official statements, should not go unnoticed by anyone listening tonight. We are 6.5 hours in, and the question has changed from how do we stop this to how much can we hold?
Military situation update. The U.S. Army has now established what they are calling hardened perimeters around the following cities. Not around the outbreaks within them, but around the cities themselves, in the sense of controlling who can enter or exit. Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, Oakland, Baltimore, and New Orleans are all under some form of military cordon as of the last hour. National Guard units in those cities have received orders that our sources describe as extreme force authorization, meaning the standard rules of engagement have been suspended. The U.S. Marine Corps has deployed from Camp Pendleton toward the Los Angeles port complex preemptively, because Los Angeles and Long Beach collectively represent the largest port system in North America. And if the outbreak reaches those docks, the consequences for supply chain, for food distribution, for medical supply movement would be catastrophic beyond easy reckoning.
We need to talk about hospitals because people are going to need medical care tonight that has nothing to do with the outbreak. These heart attacks, strokes, accidents, childbirth, and the system's capacity to handle that care has been severely compromised. Oregon Health and Science University in Portland has issued a statement that it is accepting no new admissions. Providence Medical Center in Seattle reports it was overwhelmed as of approximately 10 p.m. In Hamburg, Universitätsklinikum Hamburg-Eppendorf, one of the largest hospital complexes in Germany, has been partially evacuated after a breach in its emergency wing. Marseille's Hôpital de la Timone is under military guard after an internal incident. What this means for ordinary medical emergencies tonight is something I genuinely do not know how to soften. Please be careful. Please be as safe as you can possibly be. The hospitals are not the same places they were this morning.
It is 3:14 a.m. Eastern. We are 8 hours into this broadcast. I want to give a power and infrastructure status report. Portland. Power is out in the east and southeast portions of the city. Bonneville Power Administration has taken portions of the grid offline deliberately, isolating sections to prevent cascading failures. Seattle, Puget Sound. Energy reports rolling outages affecting approximately 340,000 customers with no restoration timeline available. Vancouver BC Hydro has issued a system-wide conservation emergency. In Europe, the German grid operator has imposed a load-shedding protocol across the Hamburg region, reducing power availability by 40%. France has activated emergency interconnect protocols with its nuclear fleet to try to maintain grid stability as Marseille draws heavily on backup systems. And on the communications side, we want you to know we are still on the air. Our generator is running. We have fuel for approximately 14 more hours. We will not go silent willingly.
The human displacement numbers coming in are staggering. The International Organization for Migration, which monitors population movement globally, has put out a preliminary estimate that more than 4 million people are actively in transit right now, meaning on roads, on foot, on trains, attempting to move away from affected areas. 4 million people moving in the middle of the night on highways that weren't designed for this kind of volume, without adequate fuel, food, or shelter at their destinations. The stories coming through our text line now are almost entirely about people in cars, on dark highways, running low on gas, children asleep in back seats, destinations uncertain. One woman wrote, "We've been on I-5 for 4 hours and moved 11 miles. My daughter keeps asking where we're going, and I keep saying somewhere safe, and I don't know if that's true. It might not be true, but it's the right thing to say to a child in the dark."
There is a development I have been sitting on for 20 minutes, trying to confirm, and I now have enough independent verification to report it. There has been a partial breakdown of military discipline in at least 2 locations. At a National Guard staging area outside of Seattle, we are not naming the specific base for security reasons, a unit of approximately 80 soldiers reportedly abandoned their posts at around midnight and began moving south in their personal vehicles. Additionally, in Antwerp, a Belgian army battalion that was assigned to port security has gone dark, with command unable to raise the unit by radio for the past 3 hours. I want to be very clear that the overwhelming majority of military personnel in every affected country are doing their jobs, are staying at their posts, are performing extraordinary service under conditions no training fully prepares you for. But when military units begin to fracture, when the people society depends on to hold the line begin to make individual calculations about their own survival, it signals a systemic stress that matters enormously.
I received a personal message, not through our text line, but through a channel I will not identify, from someone who describes themselves as a senior official at the Centers for Disease Control. They asked me to read the following statement verbatim, and I will. Quote, "The pathogen does not match any known biological agent in our database. Its rate of neurological progression is unlike anything in the medical literature. We believe it originated at sea and may have been circulating in isolated maritime populations for longer than anyone currently estimates. We do not have a treatment, we do not have a vaccine protocol, we do not have a reliable containment model. What we have is a determination to understand this as fast as possible and a belief that humanity has survived things before that seemed unsurvivable. Hold on." End quote. That came from inside the CDC. Hold on. It's what they're telling themselves. Let it be what we tell each other.
It is 4:51 a.m. Eastern. We are 9 hours and 37 minutes into this broadcast. The casualty picture, as best we can piece it together from the fragments coming in, has grown enormously. I want to give you our best estimates, with the caveat that these are reconstructions from incomplete data. North American total dead, we estimate between 45 and 60,000. Europe, somewhere between 70 and 100,000, with the Hamburg figure alone potentially exceeding 30,000. Asia, almost entirely unverifiable. But the silence from Osaka and Shanghai, and the fragmentary reports from Busan, suggest the Asian death toll may already exceed the other regions combined. We are estimating a global dead count somewhere between 200,000 and 400,000 as of this hour. These numbers are almost certainly undercounts. The world has never processed a casualty event at this pace, in 9.5 hours.
The power grid situation has worsened significantly in the last 2 hours, and I want to explain what that means practically for people listening. When power grids fail in affected areas, several things happen simultaneously. Water treatment plants stop functioning, meaning tap water in those areas becomes unsafe within 24 to 48 hours. Sewage systems, which rely on electric pumping stations, begin to back up. Refrigeration fails in homes, in stores, in hospitals where medications are stored, and traffic systems go dark, turning already overwhelmed roads into gridlock, and communications infrastructure, cell towers run on backup batteries that typically last 4 to 8 hours, begins to fail. We have already seen this cascade begin in Portland. East Portland has had no power for 6 hours. We are receiving no messages from East Portland anymore. That silence is the silence of a communications infrastructure that has simply collapsed.
There's an important military development from the Pacific. The USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, which was operating in the Western Pacific on a routine patrol, has been ordered to return to Pearl Harbor at flank speed. Additionally, the USS Wasp, an amphibious assault ship, has been repositioned toward the Pacific Northwest coast. What this tells us about the Navy's posture is that they are treating the coastal outbreak zones as something requiring both a potential evacuation capability and a defensive one. The Navy's ability to operate offshore, away from populated areas, gives them a kind of resilience that land-based forces don't have right now. We are also hearing that several Canadian naval vessels out of Esquimalt have formed a loose perimeter in Puget Sound, not blocking access, but monitoring and standing by for what their commanders are calling mass maritime evacuation potential, boats heading out to naval vessels. That's the scenario they're preparing for.
We have a listener message that I want to read, and then I want to talk about it for a moment. It came in about 20 minutes ago from someone who says they are a teacher at an elementary school in Marseille. They write in English, "I have 21 children with me in this school. Their parents could not come for them before the lockdown. The children are 6 and 7 years old. They do not understand. I told them we are having a special overnight adventure and that their parents are having adventures too, and that in the morning everyone will share their stories. I read them a book. We sang songs. 14 of them are asleep now on gymnasium mats. I am not sleeping. I will not sleep. but they are safe and they do not know they are afraid. I think that is a kind of victory. I do not have words adequate to that. It is a kind of victory. This is what I want you to hold on to. Not the casualty numbers, though we'll keep reporting them, but the 21 children asleep on mats in Marseille because someone decided to protect them from fear while also protecting them from harm.
It is 6:33 a.m. Eastern, 11 hours and 19 minutes into this broadcast. Dawn is beginning in affected European cities, and the light is revealing the scale of damage in ways that darkness had partially obscured. German aerial surveillance over Hamburg has provided imagery that German authorities have chosen not to release publicly, but descriptions from individuals who have seen it are reaching us. The Altona district, the Port district, the Reeperbahn area. Vast sections of the city show no meaningful human movement. Vehicles stopped in roadways, no pedestrians. The movement that is visible is not the movement of people going about their lives. Morning light in Hamburg today is something I cannot fully describe without risking the sort of language that causes people to stop functioning. What I will say is that Germany's emergency coordinator, in a statement issued 30 minutes ago, used the phrase partial loss of the city of Hamburg.
The South Korean military has issued an extraordinary statement in the last hour. I want to read it to you in full because its language tells you everything about how that government has assessed its situation. Quote, "The Republic of Korea armed forces have established the Busan Metropolitan Containment Zone. Military personnel are authorized to use all available means to maintain the integrity of the Nakdong River line, which will serve as the eastern boundary of unaffected Korean territory. Citizens in Busan, Gimhae, and Yangsan are directed to move north of the Nakdong River immediately. The Han River defense line in Seoul is being reinforced. We will not lose Seoul. We will not lose Korea," end quote. They are drawing geographic lines in the literal military sense. The Nakdong River line was significant in the Korean War. It is significant again tonight. A government is literally drawing a line and saying, this far and no further. That is what sovereignty looks like when it is fighting for its life.
China has broken its silence. State media has released a brief statement acknowledging public safety incidents in Shanghai's Pudong and Huangpu districts. The statement claims the incidents are under active control and that People's Liberation Army assets have secured the perimeter of the affected area. Independent verification of these claims is impossible. However, satellite imagery that has been analyzed by our contacts suggests that the port of Shanghai, the world's busiest container port, has been deliberately flooded in sections, potentially as a containment measure. If China has deliberately flooded portions of its largest port facility, that is an act of extreme desperation. The economic consequences of that decision alone would be measured in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Whatever is happening in Shanghai, China has decided it is worth any economic cost to contain it. The fact that they may not be succeeding is implied by the silence that surrounds their brief official statement.
It is 7:48 a.m. Eastern, 12 and a half hours in. I want to check in on supply chain and food security because these are going to become critical issues for people outside the outbreak zones within days, not weeks. The Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach, although protected so far by a significant Marine Corps presence, is still operating, but at reduced capacity as workers are not showing up. The Port of New York and New Jersey has been shut down by executive order as of approximately 6 a.m. Rotterdam, which the Netherlands preemptively secured, is still operational, and the Dutch government is calling it the lifeline port of Europe. They are right. The Port of Singapore has issued a statement that it is operating normally, and that they have implemented extraordinary health screening for all arriving vessels. Singapore, with its geographic position and governance efficiency, may prove to be one of the most important nodes of stability in the world right now.
A significant military development from the United States. The President has officially invoked the National Emergencies Act and the Stafford Act simultaneously at approximately 7 a.m. Eastern. More significantly, the Department of Defense has invoked the Insurrection Act for the first time in decades. This allows active duty military forces to perform domestic law enforcement functions, something normally prohibited under the Posse Comitatus Act. In practical terms, it means Army soldiers can now legally enforce curfews, control civilian movement, and use force in a law enforcement capacity on American streets. This will be controversial. This will generate legal challenges in normal times. These are not normal times. The administration has also requested emergency authorization for what it calls population consolidation, moving civilians from dispersed, hard-to-defend positions into fortified consolidation zones. The language sounds administrative. What it means is the government is going to try to gather the living into protected places and hold those places.
I want to address something that's been building in our text messages for the last 2 hours because I think it deserves to be said plainly. There are people listening right now who have lost someone tonight, who woke up this morning to a world in which someone they love is not in it anymore, in a way they didn't see coming, in a way that didn't give them time to say goodbye. I am so sorry. I am deeply, genuinely sorry. The grief that exists in the world tonight is incomprehensible in its scale, and yet every single instance of it is personal and private and shattering. The parent, the child, the partner, the friend, the colleague you saw yesterday and meant to tell something. Grief does not wait for a convenient time, and it does not respect emergencies. If you are grieving while also trying to survive, you are not weak. You are doing two of the hardest things human beings do. Simultaneously, hold yourself with some kindness tonight, even amid everything.
It is 9:15 a.m. Eastern, 14 hours into our broadcast. I want to give you a stabilization update because while the situation remains catastrophic, there are points of relative stability emerging that deserve acknowledgement alongside the continuing bad news. The following cities and regions have, as of this hour, not reported confirmed outbreak activity: Denver, Colorado; Chicago, Illinois; inland Canada, including Calgary, Edmonton, and Winnipeg; Paris, France, though Marseille to its south is severely affected; Berlin, Germany, though Hamburg to its north has fallen; Tokyo, Japan, which has sealed its port of Yokohama and deployed SDF forces in a perimeter that appears to be holding; and the vast majority of inland and landlocked nations. The pattern continues to be coastal. The infection follows shipping lanes and port infrastructure. Inland cities, if they can hold their perimeters against population movement from affected coastal areas, have a real chance of remaining unaffected. This is not comfort exactly, but it is a framework for survival.
We have a message that just came in that I want to read immediately because it offers something rare tonight. A moment of successful action. It is from a man who identifies himself as the harbor master of the port of Montevideo, Uruguay. He writes in Spanish, translated by our desk. 6 hours ago, we received warnings from colleagues in Buenos Aires. I ordered all ships in port to drop anchor in the outer harbor. I activated our port health officers. I contacted our Navy. We have screened 42 vessels in the last 5 hours. We identified 3 with crew members showing symptoms, and those ships are isolated in the outer bay under naval guard. Our city is intact, our port is closed, but our city is intact. To every harbor master who has not yet acted, act now. You have more power to protect your people than you think. That man in Montevideo with phone calls and authority and the willingness to act before the problem arrived may have saved a city. I want you to know that is also part of tonight's story.
The military picture in the United States was entered what our defense contacts are calling a second phase crisis. The first phase was responding to outbreaks. The second phase is something more complex, managing the collapse of civil order in areas not yet directly affected by the pathogen, but destabilized by fear, by power outages, by supply interruptions. In Phoenix, Arizona, hundreds of miles from any confirmed outbreak, major civil unrest has broken out around grocery stores and fuel stations. The Arizona National Guard has been deployed not to fight infected individuals, but to maintain order among uninfected civilians. Similar situations are reported in Houston, Texas, Denver, Colorado, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is the secondary collapse, the social fabric fraying not because of the pathogen itself, but because of the panic generated by awareness of the pathogen. It is in many ways as dangerous as the outbreak itself.
It is 10:48 a.m. Eastern, 15 and a half hours in. We've been here through the night, and the picture outside the windows of this studio, which is inland, which is secured, which is running on its generator, is of an ordinary morning sky, which feels like an impossibility right now. The sky doesn't know, birds are out there, the light is doing what light does in the morning, and meanwhile, the world beneath that light is unrecognizable compared to what it was 24 hours ago. I think about the people who are going to wake up this morning in parts of the world with no power, no communications, and not yet know what has happened. People in small towns in central France or inland Japan or rural America who fell asleep to an ordinary evening news broadcast and will open their eyes to a world that has changed while they slept. The moment of learning for them is still ahead. I think about that moment often this morning.
NATO has now invoked Article 5 for the first time in the organization's history related to a non-state threat. The Collective Defense Clause has been activated on the basis that the outbreak constitutes an armed threat to member state sovereignty, the legal interpretation being that when a biological agent destroys the governmental functionality of a member state, the alliance's mutual defense obligations are triggered. This is historically unprecedented, legally contested, and practically essential. What it means is that every NATO nation is now committed to providing military, medical, logistical, and economic support to affected member states. It means the German Bundeswehr can operate in Belgium without political limitations. It means French nuclear power can be redirected to support Polish grid stability. It means the U.S. military can preposition forces in European territory for humanitarian operations without host nation approval delays. The machinery of collective defense, built for a nuclear standoff, is now being repurposed for something it was never designed for, and it is the best tool we have.
The death toll has now crossed 1 million. I am going to say that again. The global death toll from this outbreak, which began, as best we can reconstruct it, sometime in the last 12 to 24 hours in port environments, has crossed 1 million confirmed and estimated deaths worldwide. Our data team has cross-referenced every available source, regional emergency management feeds, military communication summaries, WHO preliminary estimates, maritime distress signal logs, and satellite data. The number is somewhere between 1 million and 1.4 million. It is almost certainly still climbing. 1 million is the population of a mid-sized city in 12 to 15 hours. I am a professional. I have covered disasters, wars, famines. I have no experience or preparation for a sentence like the one I just said. I don't think anyone does. I am sitting here and telling you this because you deserve to know it, and because knowing it might save your life.
It is 12:31 p.m. Eastern, 17 hours and 17 minutes in. There has been a development I need to report very carefully. We are receiving information from 3 sources independently that a portion of the infected population, specifically those who have been infected for longer than the initial acute phase, appears to be entering a second behavioral state. In the early stages, as described consistently, the infected display frenzied aggression. But there are reports from military observers in Hamburg, from observers in what was Seattle's industrial district, and from individuals sheltering in Portland, of infected individuals who have been in that state for many hours, appearing to become slower, more territorial, less actively mobile. They are not recovering. They are not becoming non-threatening. But they are not the same frenzied threat they were in their first hours. Our medical source cannot confirm or explain this. But if it is real and consistent, it matters enormously for anyone choosing whether to stay sheltered or to attempt to move. Movement through areas where infected individuals have been present for many hours may be a different calculation than movement through newly active zones.
The consolidation zones are becoming a reality in the United States. The federal government, working with state governors, has designated the following cities as official refuge points. Locations where resources, military protection, and population concentration are being organized. These are Denver, Colorado, Kansas City, Missouri, Chicago, Illinois, Nashville, Tennessee, Raleigh, North Carolina, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Salt Lake City, Utah, and several others in the interior of the continent. The logic is defensible. Inland, away from ports, with infrastructure and population sufficient to sustain a community through an extended crisis. People are being urged to move toward these points. Military convoys are beginning to facilitate movement, but I want to say clearly the road between a coastal city and an inland refuge point tonight is not the road it was yesterday. If you are going to move with information, with supplies, with a plan. Do not move in panic. The roads are dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with the infected.
The European refuge points, coordinated through the EU's emergency management framework and NATO infrastructure, have been designated as Berlin, Germany, Warsaw, Poland, Prague, Czech Republic, Vienna, Austria, Lyon, France, Madrid, Spain, which has had no outbreak activity, Zurich, Switzerland, and several Scandinavian inland cities, with Stockholm and Helsinki being the largest. Sweden's government has made the extraordinary decision to open its borders to any European civilian seeking refuge, with military escorts available from border crossing points. In normal times, that kind of statement would make headline news for a week. Tonight, it is one item in an overwhelming cascade of events. But in the sweep of history, Sweden's decision may be remembered as one of the defining acts of this crisis, an open door, in the dark, that anyone could walk through.
We've received a message from someone who identifies themselves as a volunteer at a refuge point in Kansas City. They write, "We've been receiving people since 6 a.m. We have processed, I say processed, I mean welcomed, I mean embraced, almost 8,000 people as of noon. Families, old people, a lot of people alone. Nurses and doctors are here volunteering, not because they were told to, just because they showed up. There is a woman here who drove from Portland, 2 days drive, non-stop, who arrived with her dog, and 4 strangers she picked up on the way who had no car. She is sitting in our triage area, eating a sandwich, and she is shaking. But she made it. They all made it. I just wanted you to know that people are getting to safety. That is happening too, alongside everything else. People are getting to safety. That is happening."
It is 2:17 p.m. at Eastern, 19 hours into this broadcast. A global infrastructure assessment as of midday Eastern Time. Sea traffic, the world's top 10 busiest ports, are either closed, operating at drastically reduced capacity, or under military control. The exception is Singapore and Rotterdam, both of which are functioning as critical lifeline nodes. Air traffic, commercial aviation has been suspended over the North American Pacific coast, the English Channel Corridor, the Korean Strait, and all approaches to Japan. Global air traffic volume has fallen by an estimated 68% from its normal level. Ground transportation. In affected regions, major highway systems are either gridlocked or have been commandeered for military use. Rail. In Europe, rail is actually functioning relatively well. German DB, French SNCF, and Polish PUK-P have all been impressed into emergency service moving civilians inland. The Euro high-speed rail network is arguably functioning better than any other transportation infrastructure tonight, which is a strange fact in a night of strange facts.
The crisis is producing extraordinary people, and I want to spend some time on that because I think it matters. In Gdańsk, a group of university students organized a volunteer fleet of small boats, all those sailboats, motorboats, dinghies, and began evacuating elderly residents from the coastal districts when official transport couldn't reach them. They made 47 trips. In Antwerp, a retired firefighter organized a neighborhood watch of 16 people who barricaded a residential block, maintained communications via radio, rationed food and water, and defended that block through the night without losing a single person. In Osaka, so dark, silent Osaka, a woman managed to get a single message through a degraded satellite connection, 6 words, children of Namba School, safe. 6 words. Someone found a way to send 6 words, and those 6 words meant something unimaginable to every parent who received them.
The geopolitical situation is evolving rapidly, and not entirely in predictable directions. Russia, which shares a Baltic coastline and borders with Poland and the Baltic states, has made an announcement that is being interpreted cautiously by Western governments. The Russian Foreign Ministry has stated that Russia is prepared to provide humanitarian corridor access and medical military support to affected areas in Eastern Europe, and has begun moving medical units toward the Polish border. Several NATO members have accepted this offer. Others have not. The calculation is difficult. Russia's assistance is potentially life-saving, and the current moment may be one where traditional geopolitical hostilities simply have to wait, because the alternative is allowing people to die for the sake of alliance optics. Sweden, notably, has accepted Russia's offer of helicopter medical teams for northern operations. These are the kinds of diplomatic decisions that would have been inconceivable 72 hours ago.
It is 4:44 p.m. Eastern, 21 and a half hours in. I've been talking with Daniel through these hours, off and on between segments, and I want to share something I said to him about 3 hours ago because I've been thinking about it since. I said, the most remarkable thing about tonight isn't how quickly the world fell apart, it's how many people are trying to hold it together. And I believe that more firmly now than I did then. The collapse is real, the numbers are real, the horror is real, but also real. The teacher in Marseille reading to children, the harbor master in Montevideo who made phone calls and saved a city, the sergeant in Selwood holding a room of 42 people, the student with a dinghy in Gdansk making his 47th trip, the woman from Portland who stopped 4 times on a dark highway to pick up strangers. Whatever the pathogen takes from us, it has not taken that. Not yet.
Military collapse is occurring in specific locations that I need to report. The city of Osaka, Japan, is now assessed by military analysts as having undergone what they are calling total civil military failure, meaning no functioning governmental or military authority exists within the city's boundaries. The population of Osaka's central districts is unknown. Communications have been dark for 9 hours. Japan's self-defense forces have established a defensive line at the city's perimeter but are not entering. The Philippine government has announced that Manila is closing its harbor preemptively and that it is enforcing a maritime exclusion zone of 50 nautical miles around the Philippine archipelago. New Zealand, geographically isolated, has closed all ports and airspace and declared a national lockdown. The Prime Minister's statement was, "We are sealing this nation, and we are saving it." Island nations with strict control over access points have a survival advantage tonight that is not available to continental populations.
A global update on collapse status because our listeners deserve clarity. As of approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 22 hours into this event, the following cities are assessed as having undergone functional collapse, meaning government authority has ceased to operate, military presence is absent or ineffective, and the civilian population is either evacuated, sheltering without coordination, or overwhelmed. Those cities are Portland, Oregon, Central and South Seattle, Washington, the port districts of Hamburg, Germany, though interior Hamburg has military presence, Central Gdansk, Poland, the port district of Antwerp, Belgium, Central and coastal Osaka, Japan, the Pudong-nu area of Shanghai, China, with the rest of Shanghai under uncertain Chinese military control, the Piraeus district of Athens, Greece. These are places that existed as functioning human communities 24 hours ago. Today they are something else.
It is 6:09 p.m. Eastern, 23 hours into this broadcast, and I want to give you the most current and comprehensive casualty assessment we are able to compile. This is drawn from military intelligence summaries shared through NATO channels, WHO preliminary estimates, and regional emergency management data. Global confirmed and estimated dead, 3.4 million. That number includes confirmed deaths, credible estimates for areas with no communications, and conservative extrapolations from partial data. The number does not include the unknown status of Osaka's population, the unknown status of Shanghai's Pudong district, unknown areas of Africa and South America where coastal outbreaks may be occurring with no reporting infrastructure. The true number, our sources believe, is higher, significantly higher. We are in the early hours of what may be the deadliest single event in human history, and it is still ongoing.
And yet, And yet the world is not over. I need to say that plainly and repeatedly because the scale of what we've reported can make it feel like there's nothing left. There is so much left. There are roughly 8 billion people on this planet. The affected zones, catastrophic as they are, have directly impacted a fraction of that number. The inland cities are standing, the refuge points are filling, the soldiers are holding their lines, the nurses are still treating patients in hospitals that still have power, the teachers are still singing to children on gymnasium mats. The harbor master in Montevideo is probably still at his desk. The world is damaged. The world is frightened. The world has lost millions of its people in the span of a single day, but the world is not over. I need you to know that, and I need you to hold it.
It is 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 23 hours and 49 minutes into this broadcast. We are approaching the 24-hour mark. I want to give a final comprehensive status report for this broadcast cycle because the situation is evolving toward what military planners are calling a stabilization threshold. Not an end, not a resolution, but a point at which the rate of expansion begins to slow as perimeters harden and unaffected populations consolidate into defensible positions. Here is where we stand. The outbreak's expansion rate has measurably slowed in the last 4 hours. This is attributed to two factors: the hardening of inland military perimeters that are preventing infected population movement outward, and what appears to be the natural biological limit of the pathogen's active mobility phase. The evidence that older infections become less aggressively mobile may be accurate, and it is giving military planners cautious hope. The front lines, if we can call them that, appear to be holding in Berlin, Warsaw, Tokyo, Seoul, north of the Nakdong, and in the American Inland Refuge Corridor.
In the last minutes of this broadcast's first 24-hour cycle, I want to read you one more message. It came in approximately 40 minutes ago, unsigned, from a location the sender did not specify. They wrote, "I have been listening to you since the beginning. I am a doctor and I am alone in a building in a city I won't name, and I've been listening to you while I worked. You kept me company when I was afraid to be alone with the sounds outside. I treated 31 people tonight. Some of them I couldn't help, some of them I could. I don't know what comes next, but I know I am going to keep doing this as long as I can, because what else do you do? What else do you do but keep going? Thank you for staying on the air. We are going to keep staying on the air. For that doctor, for the sergeant in Selwood, for Carla in her bathroom, for all of you."
Here's the final accounting of the first 24 hours. The global death toll stands at an estimated 4.2 million people, with projections suggesting that number will continue to climb as reports arrive from dark zones. The cities of Portland, Osaka, and portions of Hamburg and Shanghai represent the greatest known concentrations of loss. Military structures in the United States, South Korea, Japan, Germany, Poland, France, and Belgium have experienced significant strain but have not collapsed. The line is holding at enormous cost. The global port system has lost an estimated 70% of its operating capacity, which will produce supply chain consequences that will last years. Power infrastructure in affected regions has failed, and restoration timelines are measured in months. The global economy has suffered a shock of a magnitude that no model had previously calculated, because no model had previously imagined this. And yet, the world has not ended. The inland cities are standing. The refuge points are full of living people. New improvised human systems of survival are forming in real time.
What ultimately happened to the fallen cities, Portland, Osaka, the port districts of Hamburg, Antwerp, Gdansk, is that they became, in the language of the military briefings we would receive in the weeks that followed, exclusion zones. Not destroyed, not erased, but sealed. Military perimeters held. The infected population within those zones denied new hosts and subject to the biological progression of the pathogen, diminished over the following weeks as the infection completed its course and its hosts ceased to function. The cities were not gone, the buildings were still there, the streets were still there, but they were empty in a way that a city had never been empty before. Reclamation would take years. Some areas would not be reclaimed in the lifetimes of the people alive tonight.
The final global death toll, as calculated by international health authorities in the months following the outbreak, was 8.7 million people. That figure includes direct deaths, secondary deaths from medical care collapse, and deaths attributable to the supply chain and infrastructure failures in the outbreak's aftermath. It is a number without historical precedent in the modern era. More people than the entire population of Austria. More people than any single war in a generation, and yet 8 billion people survived. 99.9% of the human race was alive when the final accounting was done. The species endured.
What the world looked like after, and this is the question I think we were all asking in those long, dark hours, was different and not entirely without hope. The inland cities, the refuge points, the sealed island nations, they had become the new centers of human civilization, at least temporarily. The global supply chain, disrupted so profoundly, began to rebuild around different hubs: Singapore, Rotterdam, Montevideo, and newly strengthened inland logistics networks. People who had never known their neighbors learned their names. Communities that had relied entirely on the anonymity and convenience of modern infrastructure were building something older and more resilient in its place. The harbor master in Montevideo was celebrated as a national hero. The teacher in Marseille eventually returned to a classroom. The sergeant in Selwood was promoted. The 42 people he sheltered all survived.
Humanity stabilized. That is the definitive answer. It did not emerge unscathed. It did not emerge unchanged. The geopolitical order was reshuffled. Nations that had managed their coastal vulnerabilities effectively emerged with greater influence. Nations that had lost major population centers spent decades in reconstruction. International cooperation, tested by crisis, proved more durable than its critics had predicted, and more necessary than even its proponents had argued. The militaries that had fractured in spots reformed around the lesson that discipline held when mission was clear, and that the clearest mission was the protection of the living. Medical science galvanized, achieved in 18 months what would normally take a decade. A treatment protocol was developed. The pathogen was understood, cataloged, named. Prevention measures were established. The world was never quite what it had been, but it was a world.
This is what I want you to remember. If you take one thing from these 24 hours on the air with us, the things that saved people tonight were not complicated or extraordinary. They were a harbor master who made phone calls, a teacher who sang songs, a sergeant who stayed, a stranger who stopped her car, a doctor who kept working, a radio station that did not go silent. These are not superhuman acts. These are the ordinary materials of human community, deployed with courage and stubbornness and love. When the history of this night is written, those will be its heroes. Not the weapons, not the walls, the people who decided that what they could do was worth doing, and did it.
You have been listening to Blackout Radio. This has been a 24-hour emergency broadcast beginning at 7:14 p.m. Eastern yesterday. I am Daniel Voss. We have been on the air for 24 hours. Our generator has 4 hours of fuel remaining. By the time it runs out, we expect that the emergency broadcast network will have absorbed coverage, that other stations will have come online, and that you will not be without a voice. The world is damaged. The world is grieving. The world is alive. For the families separated tonight, we hope for reunion. For the cities in the dark, we hope for light. For the 8.7 million who did not make it through this night, we hold silence for a moment, and then we keep going. Because that is what the living do.
Keep going, keep your doors secure and your radios on. Keep looking out for the person next to you. Keep believing that the morning comes, because it always does. The morning always comes, and in the morning light, whatever shape the world takes, there will be people in it worth protecting, worth loving, worth building something for. That has always been true. It remains true tonight. This is Maya Ross. This is Blackout Radio. We are still here, and so are you.
Stay safe. We will be back.